If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over, are we down? I have a loud voice, I will continue. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. We are here talking about virtues. Virtues is synonymous with values. And you see all this list of values that are mentioned here, and above all of them, put on love. Now, with that little scripture in mind, let's make some general comments. Let me comment a little bit about Christianity and culture. As you know, Nigeria is about equally divided between Christians and Muslims. We agree with our Muslim friends on quite a few issues. If I had time, I would talk to you about our agreements. We also disagree on quite a few things, and I will only talk about one of those. A little bit of background. Good Muslims will tell you that Islam is not a religion, it is a way of life. What Muslims mean by this is that Islam covers not just those issues we normally consider religious, spiritual, but it covers every facet of life. And there's specific instructions for all of those. So this means that the way Islam is practiced in Kano is essentially the way it's practiced in Jordan, is the way it's practiced in Pakistan, or anywhere else. To say this another way, Islam is a culture. You understand? Islam is what? It is not just a religion, it is an entire culture. Now here is the difference. Christianity is not a culture. Christianity influences culture, but does not create a specific culture. One of the unique things about Christianity is that it adapts itself to all cultures, preserving the legitimate parts of the culture and infusing them with Christian values and principles. That means, then, that different Christianity in different places looks a bit different. In some places, Christian worship is loud and boisterous, like Nigeria. In other places, it is quiet and serene, like in many other parts of the world. In some places, prayer is spontaneous. In other places, they don't believe they have the right to pray spontaneously. They have to be structured, written prayers. In some places, worship is short. That's not Nigeria. In other places, we have Nigeria. In some places, people worship in huge cathedrals with pipe organs. Other places, they worship in little tiny places with instruments. In some places, the church hierarchy flows from the top down. In other places, it goes from the bottom up. In some places, Christians believe they must wear their best clothes to go and worship God. In other places, people feel like they can worship better if they're casual, if they're relaxed. I think you see what I'm saying. These differences represent cultural differences. Each culture has to place its stamp on the way, has to put a Christian stamp on that particular culture. Now, that means that one can still be an African and a Christian at the same time. Did you hear what I said? Africans do not have to imitate Americans in the way they worship. Africans do not have to imitate the Singapore people in the way they do administration. You see, Christianity is adaptable to various cultures. Now, these cultural distinctives are clear even in the Bible. The very first Christians were what kind of Christians? They were Jewish Christians. So the first worship in the New Testament was very Jewish in nature. They went to prayer at the time of prayer. Whose time of prayer? Jewish time of prayer. They worshiped in the temple. What temple was it? It was the Jewish temple. The early Christians created a welfare system. You know what their welfare system was like? It looked exactly like the Jewish welfare system. Early Christians used the Old Testament as a sacred book of the Jews. The early Christians continued to observe the Jewish practices, including circumcision of males and avoiding meat that had not been slaughtered properly. You understand? This was a Jewish church, and it had a distinctive Jewish look and feel about it. However, a few years later, Christianity entered the Gentile world, and you start seeing some differences. Paul did not require the Gentiles to be circumcised. That was a departure from the Jewish kind of Christianity. And in fact, in Jewish, this is not absolutely clear, but it's mostly clear. In the Jewish circle, men covered their head to pray. Understand? But when we got to Gentiles did not cover their hair to pray. And in 1 Corinthians 11, Paul, writing to Gentiles, says men should not cover their hair when they pray. That was a distinctive cultural application. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Now, obviously, when Gentiles started entering the church, this led to cultural clashes. And of course, one of those was resolved in the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15. How do people of different cultures get along? Read Romans 14. I'll read just a little bit of it to you. Romans 14 tells about how Christians in different cultures who have different cultural perspectives and different cultural norms can still establish and maintain unity of the body of Christ. Romans 14. One person's faith allows him to eat anything, another eats only vegetables. One person considers one day more sacred than another considers every day alike. What is it that made those differences? It was culture. I hope you see. Here is Paul's own testimony about culture from 1 Corinthians 9. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, that's non-Jews, I became like those not under the law. Notice this parenthetical statement. Though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. Notice this statement. Though I am not free from God's law, but under Christ's law, he goes on to say, I do all this for the sake of the gospel. So, when Paul was among the Jews, he accepted their Jewish culture and he worshiped like them, he sang like they did, he ate like they did. When he was with the non-Jews, he went over to their side, they did, etc. I hope you understand this. Now, the most important thing that I've said to you so far was in that parenthetical statement where Paul says, Jews, when I'm not with the Jews, I don't keep the law. But then he says, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law. What does that mean? The overall passage says there's a certain amount of flexibility in cultural issues, but there is something called God's law that every Christian is bound to. Are you hearing? And that is what we are here talking about this week. God's laws, eternal laws. These are the principles that do not change whether you are a Jew or a Gentile. Whether you're an Igbo man, or a Yoruba man, or a Hausa man, or wherever you are, there are God's laws. Christ's law that does not change. I hope you understand what I'm saying. The point is that Christianity is not a culture that is imposed upon converts. The Christian lifestyle is based upon values that are then adapted to every culture. And sometimes they look a little bit different. Reverend, go. Who is the Yoruba man? Wow. Who's the Yoruba man? Oh, wow. Now, Reverend, if I was your father, and you were to greet me in the morning, how would you greet me?
I would just greet you.
Just greet me. I'm your father, so greet me.
Good morning, sir.
You say, I don't think he would say good morning. What did they say?
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. So he just looked at me and said, whatever he said. Now, this Yoruba man, if I am your father, and you were to greet me in the morning, how would you greet me? Now, the Bible says, honor your father and your mother. Do the Igbos honor their father and mother? Do the Yorubas honor their father more than the Igbos? No. It's just different. I hope you understand. You see, the eternal principle, God's law, the value is honor. It is culture that determines how that honor is given. I think I was making some of you nervous, but I think you understand the point that I'm making. You see, you can be a Christian and a Yoruba man at the same time. That is the point we're trying to make. Now, this is one of the unique characteristics and blessings of Christianity that many people do not fully appreciate. Many Christians do not understand that God created the Christian faith to be culture specific. This is a good thing because God is a God of variety. You look at the plant world that God created. Do all plants look alike? You look at the animal world. Do all animals look alike? You look at human beings. Is there variety? Variety of skin colors, hair texture, facial features. The Dinkas are 7 feet tall. The Pygmies are 4 feet tall. Who made them all? And so God is a God of variety. Now, when people come together and form a society, is it not reasonable that God would appreciate different cultures? That's why I said at the beginning, Christianity and Islam are fundamentally different. Islam is a culture. Everything about that religion is predetermined. However, in Christianity, God has given us this gracious privilege of having a certain amount of flexibility, but with core values that somehow bind us all together. Now, when God looked out over all of the things He had created, including societies and cultures, He determined they were very good. So it should not surprise us that God likes variety. However, it also should not surprise us that the devil will attack anything good God creates, including our culture, including our society. For example, God created marriage to be between one man and one woman for life. That is the value. However, even in the Old Testament days, that had been compromised so that one man would take many wives. Are you understanding? And so we can list many other kinds of cultural practices that have been perverted. A society is a collection of individuals, and a collection of individuals is treated in the Bible much like individuals. Did you hear what I said? Let me say it again. A society is a collection of individuals. And God creates that unit, not exclusively, but very similar to the way He treats individuals. For example, just as an individual human being can become depraved, a society can become depraved. I think you understand. In fact, if you go back to the Old Testament and read the prophets especially, you will see God condemning, most of the time in the prophets, He's condemning societies. Occasionally, He will condemn a specific person. You just heard Amos. This is what the Lord says: for 3 sins of Edom, even for 4, I will not relent. 3 sins of who? He didn't name a specific person, but 3 sins of that society. For 3 sins of Ammon, and even 4, I will not relent, because he, that nation, ripped open pregnant women of Gilead in order to extend his borders. God recognized that was a social or societal sin. Now, what this suggests is that just as an individual can develop positive and negative qualities, a group, a city, even a nation can develop qualities, both positive and negative. Now, the other side of that coin is also equally important. Just as God has chosen to redeem individuals, God has also chosen to redeem societies, cultures, nations. Again, already from this pulpit today, we have had scriptures read about that. Certainly the most popular of those statements would be in 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, it didn't say if my person, if one person, but if my people, a group who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and will heal their people, plural, their pronouns, plural pronouns. God is a God who is willing and anxious to bring about corporate healing. If there is a critical mass of people in that land who will personally turn to God in repentance and seek His face. That is abundantly clear. I think we all know that. Now, many Christians have failed to understand that a part of God's redemptive plan is not just to redeem individuals back to Himself, but to redeem every part of the universe, including our families, our communities, our cultures, and our nations back to God. This does not mean every nation will look exactly like every nation, because God enjoys and respects variety in cultures. But it does mean that nations, people groups can repent and God will respond. The best example of that in the Old Testament is Nineveh. Nineveh was a pagan city. It was outside of the group of people that God was working with. However, when one man went there and preached almost half-heartedly, he got the attention of the people. Because Jesus said it's the truth that sets you free. It's not the prophet that sets you free. It's the truth that sets you free. And even though the prophet was rather wimpy about it, the truth convicted those people. And the king says, do not let people or animals, herds, or flocks taste anything. But let the people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. And listen, when God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring destruction on them, on that group, as he had threatened. I hope you're following what I'm saying. We've been talking about culture, values, nations. Now, let's talk a little bit more about truth and values. There are truths in the Bible. In fact, biblical truths help to form our basic beliefs and doctrines. Many of our churches recite the Apostles' Creed every Sunday. Is that not true? The Apostles' Creed is a summary of what nearly every Christian in the world believes. These are our core beliefs and doctrines. And, are you listening? This may be a little bit controversial, but these core doctrines do not affect our lives so much, to some extent. The average person on the street will not make a decision today based upon whether Jesus was born of a virgin. Does it think about that? It's very important. It is crucial. It is fundamental. However, the beliefs of our faith that directly affect our lives are called values. You understand? Values. Virtues. Sometimes call them virtues. Values are core beliefs that affect our attitudes and determine our behavior. Values create our worldview. They create the way we view life and interact with others. Values are things we believe are right and wrong. If we are people of conviction, we will do the right things and avoid the wrong things. Values ultimately determine who we are. They make up the core of our being. The stronger our commitment to our core values, the more distinct we are as persons. Last Sunday was Father's Day in my country, and his Facebook, I don't participate in Facebook, but my wife does, and sometimes I see these Facebook things. And one of my friends from many years ago put a picture of her father up on there and wrote a little tribute to him. And I remember him very well. He had a very clear set of beliefs of right and wrong. There was right behavior and there was wrong behavior. There was right doctrine and wrong behavior. There was right music and wrong music. He was a very black and white person. Though he had very strong beliefs, he was a very kind and gentle man. Why? Because that's also taught in the Bible. He was a carpenter. I worked with him for some months. And he was an excellent carpenter. Everything he did was as good as a carpenter could do it. If you spent 2 or 3 hours with this man, you would quickly figure out his core values. And his core values created his personality and made him who he is and how we remember him. Now, let me partially address one of the questions that were answered. And this belongs to part of my 2-minute sermon, but I will throw it in here right now. If you were ever around this man named Norman Rush, you would watch your language. You hear what I'm saying? Even unbelievers, they would never use filthy language around that man. If you worked with him, you would never do anything sloppy or careless. It was never just, that's good enough. No, if you worked for him or worked around him, you had to do things as good as they could be done. If you were driving somewhere, you would not put certain kinds of music on the tape player. Is it because he had laws? Thou shalt not do this when you are around me? No, it is because his core values affected his personality, and his personality had influence that affected all those around him. Now, everyone has a core set of values, even the worst sinners. You go down here to the prison. I don't know where the prison is in Abuja. But you go to the prison and you find the worst sinner. The man who's a murderer, he's a rapist, he's a kidnapper, he's done all those things. You would say the man has no values. But you steal his soap from his prison and he will complain. That's not right. Nobody soap. I think you know I'm telling you the truth. All of us have values. The person who lives by his values is considered a person of integrity. A person who has values but does not live by them is called a hypocrite. I hope you understand. Now, Christian values are those things that are taught to be right and wrong in the Bible. We're now coming close to my topic. Christian values. Christian values are those things that are taught to be right and wrong in the Bible, and by the example of Jesus, and to some extent by the example of godly people in the Bible. In other words, we believe that it's wrong to steal, to commit adultery. Why? Because those things are condemned in the Bible. The Ten Commandments is kind of a core in the Old Testament, and they include what we call transnational values, and they're wrong. The values of the New Testament build on those Old Testament values, but sometimes they go beyond them. 6 times Jesus said, "You have heard it said," that was the value in the Old Testament, "but now I say to you," what was he doing? In some cases, he's clarifying the issue. In other cases, he is elevating it. And in other cases, he is saying that which applied to the group does not apply to you as an individual or vice versa. Are you understanding? Some of Jesus' core values are found in what we call the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom. This refers to the value of humility. Blessed are they who mourn. This refers to the value of repentance. Blessed are the meek, gentleness, submission, etc. I hope you understand what I'm saying. These are the Christ laws that Paul said he was not exempt from. These are the core values of Christianity. Now, one other little important truth. Sorry, my doctor told me anytime I talk longer than 20 minutes, I have to drink water. So I have to live by my doctor. I've written a book on hermeneutics, and I've summarized the rules of hermeneutics in what I call 8 general categories, and one of them is the rule of selectivity. What does that mean? It means the Bible is a highly selective book. John said, if all the things that Jesus said were written down, the whole world wouldn't contain all the books. So what does that say to us? John was selective in the things that he put in his book. And can you imagine, of all the millions of facts God could have given us in the Bible, he selected only those things that are found there. So, here is an important principle. When you have repetition, you better pay attention. Because the Bible is a highly selective book. And if God chose to mention something twice, or 3 times, or 10 times, that gives you some indication that God thought this was important. Are you following what I'm saying? And so you can get some kind of general idea of the priority of things by the number of times and in the different contexts in which they're mentioned in the Bible. Now, that leads to, this is my introduction. It leads me to what I wanted to talk to you about. But what I want to talk to you about is another hour. So I'll have to summarize it in 5 minutes. In preparation for this project, I did a study and I determined there were 21 lists of virtues and values in the Bible. Understand? These are things like the Beatitudes, where you have those 8 or 9 things in an order. It includes things like the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, etc. So I discovered there were 21 groups like this. And in looking at those groups, I put a little chart. I made a little chart every time they're found, etc. I determined that there were 70 different virtues found in those lists alone. That's not necessarily all of the values, but there's 70 different virtues found where there are lists. Are you following me? And after I kind of put some of them together, I finally narrowed it down to 56. In our material that we prepared, we have 30 in one, 30 in another, and 50 in another. But I determined that there were at least 56. And then I counted them. How many were found once? How many found twice? 3, 4, 5, and 6. To try to roughly determine which of these values are being stressed the most in the list. Not necessarily in the whole New Testament. I had to delimit, to use our PhD word, we had to delimit the study just a little bit. And so, what I want to share with you, I wish I had time to talk to you about all 56. But in the few moments I have remaining, I will talk to you about the top 10 in reverse order until we get to the top. You understand? I only have time to basically mention them and give us a scripture. Number 10. What do you think number 10 was? Number 10 is found in 1 Timothy 6:6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. It was the whole concept of godliness, holiness, devoutness. I think you understand. That's one of the top 10 virtues that are found in these various lists. In other words, it is one of the top 10 virtues of our Christian faith is to be like God. And to make that more practical, to be like Jesus. That is, so, being godly is one of those top issues. Number 9. Romans 12, 9 and 10. Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. The whole concept of honor, blameless activity, good reputation, noble. I joined all those words together. And being an honorable person. Again, it's sort of a general statement. But to living a life of honor, a life of blamelessness, a life of truth. Number 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Number 8 is what? Purity. Purity is a word. It's a word we borrow from other parts of society. It's a figure of speech. And it describes that it does not have any mixture in it. It's also close to the word sincere. There is no ulterior motive. It's not doing something publicly with a different mind. It's pure. It has pure thoughts, pure activities, purity. How can we have a transformation when there's so much impurity in the society? There's impurity on the TV. There's impurity on, they play some of this music on the radio that's so full of vulgarity. However, if we get a critical enough mass of pure people, those things will disappear. Number 7, in the top 10 values is, therefore each of you, this is Ephesians 4:25, therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. The concept of truth and knowledge. Truth and knowledge are not quite the same, but they overlap. And so truth and knowledge, speaking the truth, knowing the truth, living the truth, giving your word and living by your word is an important value. Now, one time when I was in university, I drove home at Christmas time. I lived 1,000 miles away. And when I got there, my vehicle had a small problem with it wasn't running quite well. So I asked my father, where is a good mechanic? So he took me to a mechanic. This mechanic was not a born-again Christian. He didn't go to church. There was nothing holy about him. So he looked at the vehicle, and I just wanted to get a little idea of what it would cost me. He said, okay, it'll cost you $12. I said, come back tomorrow. I'll have it fixed. So the next day, I called him up. I actually said, come back in 2 days. So I called him up a couple days later, and I said, is my vehicle ready? He said, no, I'm sorry. He said, when I got into your vehicle, I found this was a much more serious problem than I thought. And he says, it requires a part. I'm trying to find a part. He says, I've called 3 states around trying to find that part because it was kind of a special vehicle. And he says, but I think I've located it, and I will, by 2 days, your vehicle will be ready. So 2 days later, I went, and I knew he had spent more than $12 just talking on the phone, So I asked him, okay, I know you've had a lot of extra. What is this going to cost me? He looked at me with kind of an angry look on his face. He said, I said it would cost you $12. I said, no, I know, but, it's cost you a lot more time and energy and money. So I'm willing to pay. He said, my friend, I am a poor man, but one thing I have is my word, and I gave you my word. You will pay $12 and not more than that. This man was not even a believer. But he had lived in a culture where truth, honesty was a high value, and even the unbeliever had absorbed that value. I hope you understand. This is one of the top 10 values. All right, number 6. Matthew 23:23. Woe to you, teachers of the law, Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and honey, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law. Justice, mercy, and faithfulness. The concept of justice and righteousness. Are you understanding? This is one of the most important Christian concepts. We must be righteous. We must be just. We must do things the right way. That's what we must do. Live. That's the one we must teach our children, to be just in all of our doings. Number 5. This one really surprised me. This one really surprised me. It may surprise you. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness. Number 5 on God's Christ laws is gentleness. Gentleness refers to a calm and kind relationship with other people. People are gentle because they're not jealous or envious of other people. People are gentle when they accept what God has done in their lives. People are gentle when they recognize their limitations and are willing to accept that there are people who have strengths that are beyond their own. want me to tell you something that you may not like? The first characteristic that really bothered me when I came to Nigeria was how rough Nigerians are. Not to me. Everybody's always been very nice to me. And Nigerians are always very nice to people above their status. But what disturbed me is how we could abuse our drivers and our houseboys and people who are small boys. At times, I just wonder, how can these people claim to be Christians when they treat people that way? Gentleness. Number 5. Are you understanding? Actually, I got them a little bit out of order. Number 6 was faith, number 5 is gentleness, and number 4 is righteousness. I've already talked a little bit about that. But it is easy to see how righteousness is related to national transformation. If only those who called themselves Christians did the right thing in this country, how would it change us? Righteousness is simply doing the right thing. When we are lazy, that's not right. When we demand appreciation for work that we already paid for, that's not right. When we accept remuneration for work that we have not done, that is not right. When we give preference to people of our own ethnicity or our own family when they don't deserve it, that is not right. If everyone would simply do the right thing, Nigeria would change. We would have a surplus in our national budget. We would have decent roads and traffic would flow freely. We would have good schools where teachers are really teaching and students are really learning. We would have medicines that really work if everybody simply did that which was right. Number 3, blessed are the peacemakers. Peace is number 3 in the list of virtues, as I understand it. Peace is the absence of conflict. If you were to ask any average Nigerian on the road today, ask him what is our biggest need in Nigeria, many people, especially where I live, would say, we need peace. And fortunately, we are worshipers of the Prince of Peace. I wish I could talk about it. Number 2. This one surprised me a little bit too. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. The number 2 is the concept of patience and endurance. Patience implies something that's frustrating, discouraging, and tiring. When a person continues to do the right thing, even under these circumstances, that person has patience. Perseverance recognizes there will be many troubles in this Christian life. However, perseverance implies a choice and a determination to continue doing the right thing. And that brings us to number 1, the virtue that is most often mentioned in the list of virtues, and I think we could all know what it is. Let's all say it together. It is absolutely. It is most often found. In fact, it is linked with many other things that could be included. Goodness is referred to 7 times in this list. Kindness is mentioned 7 times. Compassion and sympathy. All of these are not part of love, but they are not part of the list of love, but they're part of love. Now these three remaineth, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. My time is gone. But I'd like to talk to you about what that word agape means. It is not an emotional word at all. You say, love the Lord your God with all your heart. We think if Philos kind of love is kind of family love, then this agape must be real serious passion. That's not it at all. Agape is simply giving love. It's not emotional. You love your enemy. It doesn't mean they sit around and go want to put your armor on. That's not the point. The point is you do the right thing. Now, I want to just conclude by flipping and talking about the opposite of love. Just one word. Somewhere near the opposite of love is greed. It's selfishness. It is self-centeredness. Jesus said, seek first His kingdom. Whosoever wants to be my disciple must deny himself. If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Love is selflessness. You heard Reverend McCoy talk about this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, if we all practice simply what the Bible teaches us, it would affect our driving. You heard the question that was asked this morning. It would affect our purchasing. Can you imagine going down and the go say lady, you say, give me 100 nada, and she gives, and you say, oh no, let me pay you 200 nada. That's far too much. 100 nada. Wouldn't it be amazing if we loved our neighbor as ourselves? Really? It would affect our neighborhoods. It would affect our education. It would affect our public transportation. It would affect our work. It would affect our politicians. It would affect our hospitals. It would affect everything about our life if we just simply love one another. Well, let me give you my 2-point sermon. All this is background. Here is my sermon. What do we do with Christian values in national transformation? I have 2 very profound points. I want you to write them down. Everybody got your Bible? Number 1, we live them. Did you hear what I said? What did I say? We just live them. We don't need to make a big deal out of it. Just live them. And number 2, teach them. That's all. That's all. We can stand up here, we can shout, we can jump, we can do exegesis, we can do theology. But the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is our philosophy is different as Christians. Muslims create society through legislation. A legislation. We influence society by being salt and light. So my appeal to you is simply, you know those principles. We're not going to stand on this pulpit and tell you much of anything new that you don't already know. Just live them and make sure you teach it to your children. Thank you and God bless you.
So once again, let's put our hands together for God's glory as we come. Professor Danny Martin, thank you so much. I like the summary. We just leave, we just teach. The 2 main things we leave there with. We will go straight into the next session because we need to catch up on our time. But we can stand up and stretch and do some things. And we'll do a quick exercise.
And then we move on. I will be inviting
Program coordinator, Professor. Yes, you will introduce the next speaker. Now, let's rise and quickly do
my head, my shoulders, my knees.
my toes.
Okay?
Let's be young again. Praise the Lord. So the Bible says physical exercise profits little. There's something there. Okay, let's go quickly. My head, my shoulders, my knees, my toes. My head, my shoulders, my knees, my toes. My head, my shoulders, my knees, my toes. They all belong to Jesus. Faster tempo now. My head, my shoulders, my knees, my toes. My head, my shoulders, my knees, my toes. My head, my shoulders, my knees, my toes. They all belong to Jesus. Thank you. Now, spotted those who could not do like this, so they will demonstrate for everybody. Can I call them out? I spare you. Next time, join us. God bless you all. Thank you.
Praise the Lord. Without much delay, we are indeed privileged this morning to have Dr. Victor Ko, a Singaporean, was born and raised in Singapore during the colonial era of British rule. He is the senior leadership consultant of the International Leadership Foundation. He's also the senior vice president of the International Leadership University. Dr. Ko is also an advisor to Kenyan government. He serves as an advisor and council member of the Kenyan National Economic and Social Council in the office of the President. He's an international leadership and economic and social development consultant. Many of you know that I love Singapore. And there's a book we use in our institute called From Third World to First. I urge that you get a copy of that book before you go, so that you will know it's possible to change a nation from a third world to a first world. To tell us how it was done, because he was part of the group that worked with Lee Kuan. The whole thing happened during their era. So what he's teaching us is not theory, but what they did to change Singapore. Please join me in the standing ovation all the way from California, flying almost 3 days to come and speak to you, Dr. Victor Ko. You're most welcome.
Please be seated. Esteemed leaders and guests of this African Forum on Religion and Development, mine is to discuss the Singapore transformation story from 1965 to the year 2000. This is a period of one generation, how Singapore went from a third world nation and became a first world nation. I was born during the time of the colonial British era, and in my birth certificate, I was a British subject. Some of you belong to that era, you understand. And I was taught as a young man to sing God Save the King. Remember that time? And the king died, then we had to sing God Save the Queen. We were caught during the period where all the colonial countries were asking and demanding for independence. Nigeria got independence in 1960, and we also pestered the British government to give us independence. But we were told we were so small. We were 4 states, 4 colonies, small colonies in Southeast Asia. One is Malaysia, Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak. And we were told if you want to become a nation, you need to come together and form a federation of nations and be a new nation. Because there's no chance for you all to survive as such small states. We agreed. And in 1963, 3 years after Nigeria, we were given independence. And so we formed our own national anthem, and Malaysia was born. We began to sing our 3rd national anthem. Some of you been to this tiny island in Singapore. You look at most of the map, you cannot find it because it's an island. It's a small, tiny island, much smaller than Abuja or Lagos. And it's a tiny dot, about 5 degrees north of the equator. And it's just at the tip of the Malay Peninsula. So this is where Nigeria is. It's just straight east. From here, it's just from Nigeria, where you are here now, just straight east of it. So this is a tiny little island. And this is a satellite photo. From east to west, it's only 43 kilometers. From north to south, it's only 23 kilometers. Those of you with your big, powerful cars, you will end up in the water if you drive too fast in Singapore. We are a tiny island, but today we have learned how to reclaim land from our sea. We started about 500 square kilometers in 1965, and now we became over 710 square kilometers. And we are still in the process of reclaiming land. All the hills in Singapore, except 2, have all been cut and used for reclamation. Now we are buying soil and earth from any country and neighbors that want to sell us. If we have too much dirt, we can sell it to Singapore. They buy it with cash. We came out of the ashes of the Second World War. In Second World War, we were attacked, invaded by Japan. And Singapore happened to be the Far East naval base of Great Britain. In other words, the Navy, the Armada of the British Navy is actually headquartered in Singapore, in the Far East Fleet. And so when the war broke out, the Japanese warplanes came to Singapore to attack the naval base. And instead of having rain from the sky, we have bombs raining from the sky. And so many of our infrastructure, buildings, homes, and people died. So it was a period of terrible suffering and atrocities, 3 years of Japanese occupation, and of course the war ended. We were all recovering from the ashes of the war. And this is how Singapore looked like in the 60s, in the early 60s. Basically, every direction you look, Singapore was a slum. We live in homes that are made of dry palm leaves. So when I visit Africa, some of my friends say, oh, you guys are from this developed country, you do not understand what is thatch huts. Let me bring you to a thatch hut. And when they bring me, I say, I grew up in that kind of environment. I'm quite at home with it. Because every direction you look in Singapore, it was a slum. Look at that. Dirty water, people live in steel. If you have a zinc roof over your home, you are doing quite well. Now, from a slum condition, today, Singapore, by the year 2000, have become a modern city. You see, this is a picture. You come to Singapore, there is no more slum. You cannot find a slum. We actually have to create one in the museum for our tourists. We say this is how we used to live like. But there's no more slum in Singapore. People live in modern homes, modern with all the basic infrastructure you want. You come into a home, there's electricity, there's water, there is even cooking gas piped to your kitchen. And at every home, there's a place for you to throw your rubbish, garbage. You don't have to wait till the night when no one is looking and toss it out of your window. There's a proper place to throw your trash. And then sewerage. And every home has fiber optic up to your door. We have decided at the time of independence, we are not going to use copper wire anymore. So Singapore is 100% fiber optic. That means you can have high-speed internet, broadband, phone, and internet. Now, this is on the left side, left bottom picture. You see the picture of the central business district of Singapore. There's a river right here called the Singapore River. And that is the river where all the traders from the east and west come to Singapore. They go into this river to be sheltered from the sea, from the winds and the storm. And there they do their trading. The early days, the people from the west come there for the spice. China, Arab, European ships. And of course, the succeeding colonial waves from the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spaniards, then finally the British. Today, you see a modern metropolis on the right. All these buildings, over 80 floors. We put a cap so that they don't continue to compete in case it's too heavy, too tall, Singapore may sink. So we say maximum, we give you 800 meters. You go up to that and we stop there. So this is Singapore today and Singapore yesterday. Now, very quickly, I want to share with you the conditions of Singapore after the Second World War. The social economic climate was very bad. Socially, people were terribly poor. Economically, people were poor, many jobless. And then poverty was the normal thing. All your friends, all your neighbors are poor people. And everyone is struggling for a simple 3 meals a day. You are lucky to have 3 meals a day. Many people cannot even have 2 square meals a day. Poverty was the norm. Abject poverty. Massive unemployment everywhere. People could not find jobs. People are willing to do anything and to get some money. And honest work. Don't use the cow. Don't use a motorized vehicle. I am the one who will pull the vehicle for you. I will pull the cart for you. I'll carry for you. You just do anything to get a job, to get something to earn. Foreign investment of very minimal. Who wants to come to a situation like that? So many poor people, and there is nothing really to invest. Because the people do not even have the money power to buy things. Then when you come to this whole area of education, we are thankful that we have the British as our colonial masters because they left behind good educational system, good judicial system, and good administrative system. But education is the last place any young man or young woman want to go. When you finish your O-levels in those days, you have grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And if you cannot find a job in a white collar, in a bank, somewhere, the last place, when there's no one want to take your application, you join the Ministry of Education to be a teacher. That was our environment. No wonder our educational system was so bad, because we have very bad teachers. The leftovers, the unwanted. The health situation in Singapore was appalling. Every kind of disease that you know of, we had it at that time. Polio, tuberculosis, cholera, typhoid. Everything that we talk about, malaria, we had it. So it was very normal for a child not to survive the first year old. So people have a lot of kids, hoping that some of them will survive. Health condition very bad. Housing, as I mentioned to you, was very desperate. A thatched hut is sometimes occupied by 2 families, and each one have a room. And there is no running water. If you are lucky, there's an open pipe and the whole village share that pipe. Otherwise, you take from the well. Open sewer, and so housing was very critical in Singapore. Corruption was everywhere. It was a way of life in public sector and the private sector. When you go to ask for someone for help or favor, never go empty-handed. You know, go pluck some fruits or ask your chicken to lay some eggs. You know, you bring a packet of biscuits, and if you can afford it, bring your chicken with you, carry it, and give. And they accept. Everyone accept. Teachers accept. Principals accept. Everyone accept gifts. And if you can afford, you give more. So corruption was a very common thing, a way of life in Singapore. Political climate was very bad because there were many political groups that are trying to win the hearts and minds of the Singaporeans. And they share with you their philosophy, they share with you their manifestos, and you have to listen carefully what they mean. So there were many groups that want to take control of Singapore. Law and order. Singapore was run by gangs at that time. I'm sure you have gangsters. You have different ones. In East Africa, in Kenya, they call them Ngiki, you know. The Italians call them the mafia. I don't know what you call them in Nigeria. And but anyway, these gangs control districts. In every district, whatever business you are involved in, whether you are selling cooked food or vegetables or fruits or meat or fish, everyone pays a protection fee. We call it protection. We are here to protect you. It's actually, they are just, collecting money, and if you don't pay up, they come and destroy your business. So this is very serious. And then the gangs will pay the local police to look the other way. And so you cannot complain to the police. It goes nowhere. So law and order was bad. And with that, sometimes you see terrible things like kidnapping, killings, assassination. Those were all very common in Singapore. And of course, if you are wealthy, you have to go to the courts to try to crack the system. External threat was very serious. China had become independent and communism has taken over. Mao Zedong was the leader, and he openly declared that he wanted all of Southeast Asia, all the countries, to be communist. So China was openly supporting the communist movement in every country, in Malaysia, then in all the neighboring countries, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, every country was experiencing communist subversion. We have a strange situation. In 1963, when we finally got independence from Great Britain, Indonesia, our immediate neighbor, with a population of nearly 100 million at that time, was so threatened by these 4 small British colonies coming together to form a new nation called Malaysia. Indonesia was under the Dutch for a long time. And because of their own suspicion, they were so upset that they declared war on this newly found nation called Malaysia. And that war was called the Confrontation War. Now it's very scary. Singapore at that time was only barely 2 million people. And you have a neighbor who declares war on you when you have your first independence. That is not a very pleasant thing. So Indonesia was a threat to us. Then the Soviet Union was in the thick of the Cold War with the West. And their navy will just come through our shores. You can see them from our shore. And they could have just marched in the walkway, and Singapore would have been gone. These were threats. But the greatest threat came 2 years later. We got independent in 1963 with part of Malaysia. But for 2 years, we could not agree on the values and the direction. What is the vision for this new nation called Malaysia? For 2 years, we were arguing, debating in Parliament. Very basic thing. Do we believe in justice? Yes. But some of us are above the law. We are special. Oh. Then we said, do we believe in equality? Yes, we believe in equality. But some of us need to be more equal than others. This is not animal farm. We can't have that. So we went on and we began to say, what kind of, do we have a secular nation where all the major religions are respected? No. One religion needs to be the state religion. So we had many arguments, day in, day out, and finally, 2 years later, in 1965, we were shown the door. We were booted out and kicked out of Malaysia. That was a terrifying time. I remember Lee Kuan Yew cried before us in the nation. All of us cried. It was a very, very terrifying time. You know why? Everyone predicted our demise. Everyone predicted our doom. That there's no way Singapore is going to survive. You will just disappear from the face of this earth. Everyone predicted the worst outcome that can happen. And they are quite right in some ways, because from a nation point of view, we are a small island, we have no land for farming, no hinterland, we don't have natural resources, we don't have minerals, we have rocks, and a lot of hungry people. We have nothing, we don't even have water. Can you believe that? British, when they were controlling that part of the world, in Malaya and Singapore, they put a treaty that Malaya has to sell their water that is flowing into the sea just across the Singapore causeway. Sell it to us at cash price. And these are treaties that cannot be revoked until the time of expiry. So we have 100-year treaty for water, different treaties assigned to us. So without that water, we are gone. We don't even have water. Our water from the well is not enough. It's salted. We don't have fresh spring water. So how do you survive in a situation like that? People are so poor, in poor health, badly educated, and you are born into this world as a sovereign nation. The first thing we do is to tap on and call on the group of men and women who were privileged. They were smart. They were given government scholarship. They were very brilliant, bright people. And of course, during the days of the British colonialization, when the smartest people got the scholarship, where do they go? Mother England, right? So our best go to the Cambridge, the Oxford, the London School of Economy, the best universities. And they sit with the British elite. The aristocratic, the elite class of Great Britain. Many of them not just finish their education, they come out top. Lee Kuan Yew was top in the class, first class, sitting with all the princes. He came out top. Many of them, Goh Keng Swee came back with a PhD from London School of Economics. So we have our best people. We call on them, and they have to decide whether they want to have a part in building that new nation, or they want to take care of their own family and their career for themselves. So we say, if they can develop and become a first world nation, we can. So we begin to dream. We say we want a multi-racial society. That means you cannot get rid of the races you don't like. You just have to learn to like each other and live together. Because all of us came as immigrants from other older civilizations. Multi-religious. We respect Buddhists, we respect Hindu, we respect Muslims and Christians. These are the four major religions that receive equal treatment. Then before independence, we were killing each other, fighting, quarreling over ethnic issues. Smallest thing. Some people were agitated and their whole communities rising up, killing innocent people from the other side. We got all the leaders together and say, can we put this behind us? Can we start with a nation that we will not forever be having ethnic strife? And we decided that is the value system we want. We want a multiracial, multi-religious nation. Then we said we want a social democratic country. That means it will be a democratic country, but not a pure democratic country like capitalism. Because we notice that people get caught in social poverty trap, generation after generation. They are caught in generational poverty trap unless you give them a chance to live. So we have to think of ways to help the poor, the lower income, even the lower middle income. How do we help bring prosperity to them? So this is how our vision was formed. And on the basis of justice for all, equality for all, meritocracy, and integrity. We came from a system where people use nepotism. That means all my relatives, all the people from my tribe get the best jobs. We say no more of that. We want meritocracy based on merit. We don't want cronyism. All the cronies, all my money friends, they get the best job. They are not qualified and they get the job. We say no more of that. We want Singapore to be based on meritocracy. So we want an independent public service commission that can stand in questioning on how people are chosen and on the criteria. Then we went on to dream and say we want to go from third world to first world in one generation. Not a forever dream. Not a dream that says we want Singapore to be transformed in 100 years' time. Who is around? We say no. We are young people. Even when our hair turns gray and white, that's alright. Sociologists tell us that one generation is defined as 35 years, generally speaking. So in 35 years, our hair may be gray, may be white, but we want a Singapore transformed. We are determined that is where we want to go. And let our children and the generations to come enjoy it. So we set that as our goal. Next, we say we want a nation led by men of integrity. We want a corruption-free nation. We saw what corruption has done. Corruption is wickedness. Some of the money that is supposed to go to the people to help the poor, help the schools, help children, and they all get siphoned away. It's like a big container. And you ask everybody in the country and say, everybody do your part, help to fill up this giant container. But this container is never filled up because at the bottom it's leaking like crazy, siphoned off. So we say no country can develop, can prosper when corruption continues. So we determined to draw a line and say we want a corruption-free nation. Today Singapore is one of the most corruption-free nations in the world. Then we want a disciplined, hardworking, productive, skillful, educated labor force. We do not benchmark with our neighbors. We benchmark with the best, most productive labor force in the world. Be it Japan at that time, or America, or Europe, Germany. We set our sights and say we want to compete at the world level in terms of good practices and principles. So we begin to tell our people, you need to work hard. Laziness is not accepted. You need to be rugged, you need to be disciplined, you need to be hardworking. So we begin to inspire that kind of value in our young people. Then we say we need delayed gratification. Delayed gratification means a society needs to save. The country, the government needs to save. The people need to save. When you save, you can do many things. Agree? So we encourage our savings for the people. Delayed gratification. You cannot have everything you want. When you don't, you cannot afford it. There are countries that want things. People are encouraged to buy things with money they don't have, buy things they don't need. You can't do that. Living on credit is very dangerous. We say delay your gratification. That's an important value system. Then we say we want national self-reliance. We look around and we see that the countries that ask the developed country for aid, to give them money to develop, most of these countries become beholden to the donor. And the donor begin to dictate to you what you can do and what you cannot do. So we say no. So in our early days, we needed money. We went to the World Bank and borrowed money. The money, paid that these are our national debt. And we pay every dollar. We pay everything we borrowed, the principal and the interest on time. Never default. Never ask for forgiveness when we borrow money. Today we are 100% debt free. Singapore has no debt. And that's a very important thing because some of the Western nations, they want you to continue to be dependent on them. And they do not want you to develop. They want you to sell the cheap resources to them. Because if you industrialize, you become a competitor. So you have to understand that. Think about it. The last 50 years, since Ghana first became independent, right? First country in Africa, up to today, you are now going to be 55 years old this year, right? Because your independence is 60. Have you known of any African country, not counting South Africa, that have become a developed nation in these last 55 years? Not one. Does it make you think something wrong about these international policies that is put on us? So we have noticed that very early. Anytime an institution, an international institution, want to put conditions, what we can do, we cannot do, we say you keep your money, we don't need it. We just want to borrow your money and we put it in our national sovereign debt. We will pay you, but don't tell us what we can do. We are the ones who decide. Then tripartite government system. We notice that the three institutions of society in most countries are at loggerheads and fighting each other. They are the government, representing the government, then the business owners, and then the labor leaders, labor unions. These three institutions, government, business, labor, are always fighting. That's what we notice that. And all of them appear to have different goals. Opposite goals. Now we come together and say, can we have a win-win-win situation? You win, and you win. We all win. Is that okay? No, we gang up together, we win, and you lose. Or you two win, he lose. Or say no, everyone win. So it has to be objective, based on your productivity. Not just wildcat strikes. When I was growing up, there was strike everywhere. Today, the teachers strike. Teachers go on strike. So you go to their demand. Tomorrow, the bus drivers go on strike. You pay them the next day, the postmen go on strike. You pay them the next day, the garbage collectors go on strike. There's no end to it. Very simple. We put a law in Singapore, no strike. Strike is illegal. Can you imagine that? But we have an industrial arbitration court. Anytime you disagree between labor and your owners, go to the industrial arbitration court first. And when it's determined that you have been poorly and badly managed, there is unfairness, injustice, you are given permission, then you can strike. So Singapore has a very hard-working labor force. Don't strike, no going slow. When you get the job, you work hard on it. Then what else do we have? Employment for all. That was our dream. We have so much massive unemployment. And we begin to create jobs. We begin to industrialize. We begin to attract foreign investors, FDI, foreign direct investments. We go to the multinational corporations and say, come to Singapore, put your factory, put your manufacturing facilities here. And we did that over 5 periods, this 50 years. How did we go? We start with labor intensive. You know why? Because we have so many unemployed people. So we start with labor intensive industries. After 10 years, we went for capital intensive. We begin to encourage factories to buy machines so that you can replace some of the people, because jobs are now able to create quite good jobs. Then we went to the third stage. We began to go for skills intensive. That means we begin to ask the people to learn skills. Don't just be an ordinary labor. And then the next stage, technological intensive. We begin to look at how to make computer chips, wafer. Today, we are on the world's most advanced industrialization stage, called knowledge-based industries. But you have to go through those stages. You cannot suddenly jump because your people are not prepared for it. Today, we not only have employment for all, we have more jobs in Singapore than there are Singaporeans. We have 5.5 million people. The real Singaporean is only 4 million. 1.5 million are foreigners, given proper work permit and visa to work in Singapore. 1.5 million. Enjoying Singapore's salaries and standard of living. Today we have achieved zero unemployment. If you find a Singaporean who is unemployed, you can assume he is sick, lazy, or choosy. Because he doesn't want to do this job. He thinks it's better than this job can offer. And that's because we have full employment. Next, we want quality, affordable, and sustainable public housing for all. We do not want to live the squalid slums of the yesteryears. We begin to build modern homes. We begin to make it not just for a privileged group of people, but 90% of Singaporeans live in public housing. We started simply, but today, all our public housing are modern housing. You go to Los Angeles, New York, London, when you talk about public housing, it is always synonymous to urban slums, right? You go to urban housing, public housing in these Western cities, drugs, crime, immorality, graffiti everywhere, windows are broken, lights are not changing, anything that can be stolen is stolen. It's just a dangerous place to go, but not in Singapore. They are modern, clean homes. And the people are not renting it, they own it. They own their apartment if there's space available. Now when you own your apartment, you will have to take care, agree? When some kids come and dirty the surrounding, you stop them, you don't have to call the police. Kid, what's the problem? There's a field out there, go and play there, not here. And so you will have to take care. And the government actively get involved in asset enhancement so that your home get better and the value goes up. When you are ready to sell it, as appreciated greatly. Then, we want a quality education, healthcare, infrastructure, and a high standard of living. Today, Singapore has become the educational center of the world. One of the major educational centers of the world. Many of the Africans are coming to Singapore. Asians come to Singapore. They send their kids as early as primary school kids to secondary school, to college, university, masters, PhD. Singapore has become an educational center of the world. And we are not afraid to send our best people to get best trained, all the educational centers in the world. And we also welcome non-Singaporeans to come and teach in our university and pay them international price. As good as they can command, we can pay them. So we have a very good educational system today. And we have a healthcare second to none, where many people who can afford to fly to Singapore to get their medical treatment. Some of the heads of states of African nations are our regular customers. And so we cannot deny them. Infrastructure, we have some of the best infrastructure in the world. Every road is paved. Every road is paved and there's no potholes. Every road has drainage. Every road has lightings. And so Singapore is not only roads, we have flyovers, we have train above ground and underground, we have freeways underground. When you have a small country and you don't have vast amount of land, you have to learn to take advantage of what is below the surface and what is above. So we go up and we go down. We cannot go sideways. And so we cannot deny them. Infrastructure, we have some of the best infrastructure in the world. Every road is paved. Every road is paved and there's no potholes. Every road has drainage. Every road has lightings. And so Singapore is not only roads, we have flyovers, we have train above ground and underground. We have freeways underground. When you have a small country and you don't have vast amount of land, you have to learn to take advantage of what is below the surface and what is above. So we go up and we go down. We cannot go sideways. Will be exempted, or will have impunity, or will be protected if you are caught for corruption. During that 35-year journey, 3 cabinet-level ministers were caught for corruption. They were brought to court, they were charged, they were put to jail. And whatever they have taken corruptly was taken away from them. The signal is very clear. There is zero tolerance for corruption. So you come to Singapore, don't try to bribe anybody. You'll be in trouble. Okay? Not even the custom or the immigration officials. Now we fight corruption 2 ways. Of course, we have very serious laws, but we also pay our people well. As the country prospers, we pay our people well. In the private sector and the public sector, they are all benchmarked at the same level. So that anyone who has his wealth, you drive a big car, you build a big home, you have no shame about it. It's all clean money. We do not want dirty money, we do not want money laundering, and we hate cowboys, we hate crooks, and we hate conmen. So if you are serious, you are honest businessmen, you are welcome. Welcome business people from all over the world. And people who work in Singapore from all over the world. We are colorblind. Everyone is welcome. Now, after we have our original vision and our values crystallized, we begin to get the whole country to embrace that vision and the core values. Nationhood was in school with the process. Of course, we get the best people we know and we begin to master plan. That means if you have a vision, you need a plan. A plan tells predetermined a course of action. You are here now. Where is it you want to go? In 35 years, Singapore went from third world to first world. How do you develop the land that have been given by God? So we have our master plan. And so Singapore, you come to Singapore, you will find that every inch is carefully master planned. There is clear land usage, and it's open, it's no secret. Everyone can see and participate. Where we are having housing, where we are having industries, where we are having commercial area, and you can go and bid for parcels of land to develop. Everyone is open. So the master plan is brought, and the master plan gets reviewed every 10 years. We still have land bank. Bank, that means land to develop for the next 10, 20, 30, up to 50 years for Singapore to grow. So this master planning is a very important step. Now what did the government do? Once we settle down, we are still in the process of settling down. We begin to ask ourselves, what should we do to build capacity for the nation? National transformation requires that we all get involved in building capacity. Capacity means capability, ability. We need to be capable of providing for our people. So what are the institutions that need to be in place? First thing, industrialization. Why? Well, the basic purpose, put it at the layman's level, at the layman's language, is you need to help your people to put food on the table. Is that reasonable? You cannot have a hungry population at large always hungry, living from hand to mouth, and you preach and you talk about some grandiose vision. At the end of the day, they are hungry. So you need to be involved in the business of job creation. Young people who are educated and cannot find jobs, they are desperate people. And if they are living in the urban, in the rural area, they can at least live in the land, live out of the land, but they grow the roots and all that. But if you are in an urban situation and you are poor and jobless, you are a desperate person. Agreed? You will resort to crime, you will resort to all kinds of bad things because you are desperately hungry. So we say the first order of the day is job creation through industrialization. What we had was a portion of the country filled with mangrove swamps, 25%. We look for the best person trained in economics, PhD, from London School of Economics, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, the Deputy Prime Minister. And his job was to transform and change the mangrove swamp into an industrial city, and he succeeded there. We drain off all the swamps. You know, a mangrove swamp, some of you may not know what it is. It's characterized by malaria, has infested with snakes and crocodiles. You run away from it. You don't want to get near to those places. But we clean up, drain away, and we fill it up with all the earth. We do the land grading, and we provide all the best infrastructure. So this is the first institution, trained in economics, PhD, from London School of Economics, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, the Deputy Prime Minister. And his job was to transform and change the mangrove swamp into an industrial city, and he succeeded there. We drain off all the swamps. You know, a mangrove swamp, some of you may not know what it is. It's characterized by malaria, has infested with snakes and crocodiles. You run away from it. You don't want to get near to those places. But we clean up, drain away, and we fill it up with all the earth. We do the land grading, and we provide all the best infrastructure. So this is the first institution that began to think of. Estimated 50 million Chinese in China died under his rule. 50. Can you imagine that? Those he did not like, those he killed. So China in 1976 was a bankrupt economy. Bankrupt. You go to every store, every shop, there's no food. People have three colors only to wear: blue, gray, or black. That's all. No pattern, no. All the girls do not put on makeup. It was a terrible country. 2 years of confusion, and they found a man of integrity. This man, Mao tried to kill 3 times, but failed because others protect this man because he was a man of integrity. Deng Xiaoping was asked to be the leader 2 years later in 1978. In his first year as the leader of China, he took his best team of advisors and flew to Singapore. Look at the situation in Singapore and make a formal request. Please come and help us. Our people are dying. Starvation, famine, everything gone wrong. So, 2 years of planning and careful research, they asked us and we helped them plan the first 4 special economic zones of China: Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen. They became the powerhouse. In 2010, 30 years later, China overtook Japan as the world's second largest economy. So we had a small part. The smallest country in the world helped the largest country in the world. It is. And we was all pragmatic in our arrangement. Today, every of the 31, we call it your states, we call it provinces, all ask Singapore to help them. In China today, if you are a mayor vaccinated, that means you are vaccinated to be the next mayor. One of the requirements the Chinese government require of you is you must come to Singapore for 2 weeks study how to be a mayor. It was not required by us, it was the Chinese. So we are still their number 1 customer and advisor to help them with developing their different provinces. Secondly, another institution is very important called the Economic Development Board. And this group go out to the first world, go to the first world nations everywhere and say, please come to Singapore. Please bring your team to come and build a factory, facilities in Singapore. Why building in Europe or America? The cost of transportation is too much. And we begin to give them reasons why they should put their investment in Singapore. And we succeeded. In 35 years, we attracted over 7,000 large multinational corporations to put their factories in Singapore, supported by over 125 small and medium enterprises. So Singapore is an industrial city. But as we change, the politics come industries, we tell them, please consider going to our neighbors. They have a lot of land. And you have problem, we help you, we'll pay the expenses for you. So today, Singapore have industries that are clean and non-pollutive. So this second institution was very important, and they are the one who started the concept called the one-stop shop. Most businesses, when they come to your country, they have to go to 35 to 45 different offices to get permits, to get license. And everywhere they have to put something there. It's a headache, it's a pain. In Singapore, we have what we call the one-stop shop. You can tell them how much electricity you want, how much water, how much land, everything. And once we say, okay, yes, we will make sure you get it. If there's not enough power, we build another power plant. Simple as that. Yes. So we are able to provide all the requirements of our investors. They are the happiest people on earth. A survey was taken from all these international business people who live outside their country. The city that you want to choose to live, raise up your family and work and have fun, choose a city. You know what city they chose? Singapore was the number one city they requested. So then the next group is called the Trade Development Board. Now after you have these factories that come out, all right, you need to export them. So Singapore actively export. We are the world number one distribution center. Most of the big ships, some of them were from Europe, will rather send their goods to Singapore and have Singapore send it to Africa, rather than send through Africa. Because we are so efficient in our airport as well as our seaport. Alright? A ship comes in the morning, in 12 hours it leaves the harbor with everything you want. Water, food, supply, fuel, everything, repairs, all that. And 24 hours, 365 days. Singapore becomes the redistribution, repackaging hub of Asia and Europe. Then the Urban Redevelopment Institution. Because we came out from a messy, undeveloped situation where people do not have rules and laws, they build buildings that are unsafe, that are fire hazard or a health hazard, and they encroach on land and all that. So we begin to put in law and order, building codes, building controls, so that no one is exempted. So the Urban Redevelopment Authority basically is in charge of master planning and implementing the master plan of Singapore. Then we have savings. Now, we realize that people need to save. And if you just tell them to save, they won't save. So we enacted laws. We have laws legally requiring every citizen to contribute to this Central Provident Fund. This Central Provident Fund, by law, requires that a citizen contribute 20% of his monthly gross salary. So if I make 1,000 per month, whatever currency, I take home 800 and this 200 go into the Central Provident Fund. This is not a tax. This is a savings. So savings means you earn interest. So the government put a promise, a guarantee that your money is paid 2.5% interest rate. 2.5. Today, most of your money in the bank savings cannot even hardly get 1% of it or 2%. Singapore, the government guarantees you 2.5%. A second law requires that all the employers in Singapore, including the government, must contribute basically an equivalent amount, another 20%, and put into their account. So monthly, I have a 40% savings of my gross salary. Isn't that fantastic? If you want to become an employer in Singapore, remember, the cost of labor is 120%. The 100% for the salary and 20% for the additional contribution. Now, with that kind of savings, the government can provide for the people a safety net. This is a comprehensive social security system. So that when we become old, we all don't have to become a burden to the nation. Right? We all will get old. While we are young and we are productive, we are hardworking, we save. Now, this money is put into 3 accounts or 3 pots. First one is retirement. So every Singaporean, when he retired, he will have money to live on. Second, which is the largest slice, about 75% of what is in their savings, goes to housing. So that every Singaporean can own a home while he's a young man or young woman, not when he's 50 or 60. So Singaporeans today, at 20 years old, 21 years old, after they finish their university, find a spouse and they get a home. Isn't that wonderful? A model. How is that possible? The government now acquire land and build modern houses. You own the home, not the land. Understand? So the cost of the home does not include the cost of the land. And the government thinks of ways, economy of scales, stockpiling, standardization, and design, so that you have about 4 or 5 design of homes you want. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedrooms home, according to what you and your wife can afford. And everyone is allowed to own a home. Only one home, but you must stay in it. You cannot use it for speculation. And you buy a lease, a 99-year lease. Is that good? That's excellent. At 20 years old, 21 years old, you buy a home that is good for 99 years. It means it will be 120 years old. Understand? How many of you plan to live that long? So in your lifetime, every Singaporean can have their own home. We make it affordable. Now, a young couple just got married and say, how can I own a home? I just got my first job and I just contributed my first contribution, 20%, and my spouse contributed 20%. The government came up with another law. Every citizen is allowed to borrow housing mortgage from the government. Wow. The government now becomes the people's bank for housing mortgage. At what rate? That's the question. At 2.6% interest rate per year, you can borrow the money for this house for the next 25 years. Now, think about that. My money I put into the government treasury pays me 2.5. Now I want to buy this house, I go and borrow the money from the government at 2.6. What is the spread? 2.5 to 2.6, the spread is 0.1. Many countries, you put your money in, they give you 1%. You want to borrow your money from them, what did they say? 20%, 23%. I've been to countries with 25%. Who can afford it except you are rich or you have a big salary? Make sense? But now every citizen can own a home. Today, 90% of Singaporeans live in a home and own a home. After 5 years, you must stay 5 years. You can sell it to another Singaporean who wants your area and who cannot wait. And you sell it at a full price, not at a subsidized price. When we buy, when you get the key, you're only paying 1/3 the price. For example, this home costs 3 million in the market price. I buy it for 1 million. That means I already get 2 million profit the day I bought the house from the government. 5 years later, with asset enhancement, it goes up to 5 million. If I sell it to another Singaporean, how much do I make? 4 million. I bought it at 1, remember? And I sell it at 5. The government put another law in Singapore called no asset, no capital gains tax. In other words, a Singaporean can sell his home and the government intentionally refuses to tax it. and you are allowed to do it twice in your life. Today, every Singaporean owns a home. Every Singaporean, through this strategy, it's not just a housing, but it is also a redistribution of wealth. Every poor, every low income, middle income person now can own a home. And they, on paper, their home now is worth sometimes $500,000, sometimes $1 million. So Singaporeans have one of the world's highest density of millionaires. So we have completely removed the poverty level and turned the poor into middle income. This is the beautiful strategy that is now adopted by United Nations and the African Union for developing countries. And we'll be very glad to share with you. Singapore will hold no secrets. Anything you want to learn, want to know, you ask, we will tell you. Now, I've been graciously given 2 sessions. The next time I will continue my speech, my talk will be 5 p.m. So my time is up for this first part. Thank you so much.
Fantastic! Fantabulous from this side. To God be all. To God be all.